And good afternoon. It's now officially the afternoon, I think, for everybody concerned for American Scouser TV. Liverpool, Brighton 2-2, not the thrilling, overpowering, dominant game we expected in the pre-match. And we have Harry with us today to talk about. Harry, what were your thoughts on that game?
I'm gutted that we didn't win it, to be honest. Sounds daft, but I think that there was a spell in the second half where we really had the opportunity to go and get a third, and I couldn't really see Brighton getting back into it if that third goal had gone in. And we had a little spell at the end. It seemed like they were happier with the point than we were. So going into the game, I'd have been happy with a draw, and leaving it with a draw, I kind of feel like it's 2 points dropped.
We've talked about, rather, I mean, we've talked consistently on the pre-matches and on the Thursday night podcasts about this team possibly being a dark horse league challenger, especially given that it's a transition year, quote unquote. But we can't keep conceding goals the way we concede them if we want to challenge for the top spot, can we?
No, and I think that was such a hallmark of the sides that were getting in the high 90s, and the side that won the league in terms of points totals was they were really good at keeping clean sheets. And I think that we had that really good season where we got to the Champions League final and in 2018, but we finished fourth in the league. And I think it was bringing in Alisson, bringing in Fabinho, and really tightening up the defense that took us to the next level. And the team we've got at the moment feels like it's got all the firepower of that team, and it's brilliant, and it can score goals and it can blow teams away, and we will concede goals. And yeah, I'm really trying to resist the urge to say goals win games, but defenses win titles, because it's such a cliche, and I've said it now because it's true.
In terms of, Elliot got taken out at half time. We had discussions about, maybe this wasn't the game for Elliot, or maybe he was being rewarded. But in hindsight, which is always 2020 and is always superbly accurate, would Endo as a 6 being a better bet, given how lackadaisical we were at the back at times?
He might have been. I definitely think he would have brought a bit more stability defensively, but I thought it was really useful having McAllister in that pivot position for when we were trying to build out. We were really clearly trying to do what Brighton do, in the sense that we would bait that press forward, create space in behind, and then look to get in behind them. And so having a really press-resistant player in McAllister dropping into that pivot position to attract pressure and then get the ball away. Obviously, for their first goal, that didn't quite go according to plan. But I think that he was the best candidate for that position. I don't know that Endo would have done a better job than him there necessarily. But I did notice we seemed more defensively solid in the second half. Not just because Elliot came off, but that meant that Szoboszlai could go over to the right-hand side and that midfield three and kind of cover in transition, which, he was a lot better at that than Elliot was. And they were both better than Henderson was last year when we got beat 3-0. And Brighton historically always like to target that right-hand side of Liverpool's defence. So getting Szoboszlai over into that right of the midfield three was really helpful. So I do think it was the right change to bring Elliot off at half-time. Whether or not we should have started Endo, I think when he gives you out of possession, you have to balance with he's more limited in possession in that kind of pivot role than McAllister is. So I think it was a show of ambition, I think, from Klopp to go, no, we're going to start with three of our more attacking midfielders rather than having like a pure screen and then two midfielders.
Let's bring in Tamuj in there. Some snacks for the dogs, no snacks for the dogs. Is everybody being punished, Tamuj? And what did you think of the game?
Some snacks for the dogs, not enough snacks for the dogs, that's for sure. One snack short each. I don't know, disappointing, isn't it? Like, it felt like we had control and then we just totally lost control in that second half suddenly. I think that the thing that gets to me the most, I was just writing it on Discord. How many times have we seen that where an opposing attacker dives in between our back and our center back? And this time, they got the foul, but I've seen it over and over and over again where they just dive in between and clear into the box afterwards. I don't understand that positioning and then defending, because I knew it was about to happen the moment I saw it, and you got a foul out of it. But then we give set piece after set piece. That's disappointing. In the beginning of the second half, it felt like this was going to be a tough but earned 3 points. at the end, it was more like, oh, we saved the points, which is really odd within like 20, 25 minutes.
In terms of the, it occurred to me in the first half, and not because of Elliott necessarily, but at least because of Gravenberch maybe coming on the field. The press in the first half was very isolated. The front three would go looking for the ball, and there would be acres of space between them and the midfield, which in the second half we improved. Now, we unfortunately, and I don't know why they don't do this, Peacock don't have tactical cam for all the Premier League games, which would be fantastic because it's really interesting to watch those. But what was that the plan? Did it look like the plan to sit back more and contain Brighton, Harry, or do you think maybe there was a little bit of hesitancy in the back line that created that separation? Because they played through our press at will in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, we have to acknowledge that Brighton are one of the best teams in the world at building up from the back and solving opposition pressure. So I think to have that happen to you a couple of times in a game, you kind of have to accept it and have a goalkeeper ready to save the 1v1s, which Ali did have a really big 1v1 that he stood up to really smartly in the second half. I think that we went out after them. I think that the idea was they're really good at this, so our press just has to be even better, which is bold, and it could have really blown up in our faces. Before the game, I was expecting us to sit off and try and engage slightly later on, and I think we had Szoboszlai at times pushing up into the last line, so we had four kind of pressing Brighton's back four. So I think we were brave and we went for it, and then when they get out, there is that big gap in the midfielders. When you have four pressing from the front, you only have two midfielders. So if one of them goes and doesn't get there, there's so much space. And I think that there is a bit of a hesitancy to go. And I think when the midfielders go and they back up the press and the fullbacks come up and they back up the press, it's a bigger risk, but it's actually more effective. It's almost more risky to play it safe because then you just leave these big gaps that you pointed out. And so I think we sometimes did it well. Sometimes we let our kind of fear get the best of us. But for Brighton to get a goal from a mistake and a set piece, as opposed to them building up and slicing through us the way that they like to, I think that that's a credit to how well we coped with their build-up play today.
But Temujin, in terms of the goals conceded, and it is being the story of the season, is we're not really getting outplayed for a lot of the goals. We're outplaying ourselves a lot of the time at the back. It's almost as if since Van Dijk's injury, that has been literally the quality of the defense going down, and we're not coaching the issues out of them, the players, and we're just having the same issues with either concentration or bad positioning, or the setup just creates too many gaps for us to cover. We said before you came on there, you can't sustain a league challenge if you're going to concede an easy goal, at least one every week. How do we fix it?
That's a loaded one. I mean, here's the thing. The first goal, I felt
I'm not giving you the easy questions because it's a story.
I guess I got to switch back to hosting. So I'm asking these questions instead. I think the deal is when, like in the first half, when we were watching that, and I even said, can we, for God's sakes, put Trent back as right back? Because I really think it's really messed up our build-up in the beginning because you're suddenly switching, looks like your center back and your right back in build-up. So now you have Matip out wide right. So you're taking away Matip's up the middle runs, right, when he has that space. And now you're also taking away the right wing. I thought Mo was way too isolated in the first half because Trent is in the middle. Matip is not going to push up because he knows he's not going to be able to get back. So now suddenly it's just more up top right there with Harvey running around trying to find space in the middle. And, obviously you put Ali in the build-up. I split that load in terms of Ali kind of falling. We almost put ourselves to sleep with our passing in the back because Alisson kind of falls asleep on that one. He's not in goal. I mean, I understand why he was initially there. He's in the build-up. He's trying to get wide to receive the ball. But the moment you give the ball, you got to get your butt back to your natural position. And I think he just had a lag over there where he couldn't get back. So that is part of the build-up. And I really felt like second half we did better with that. I'm assuming that was something that we talked about where, Trent and McAllister were working a lot better together. And there were too many times where they would do give and go, they would do a split to get one of them open. And it usually was Trent getting Mac open, because I feel like the teams are focusing on Trent now in that role. When we first did it as a surprise element, it worked like a charm. Oh, look at that. Holy shit, Trent is suddenly in midfield throwing a pass. When we're doing it regularly, I think it becomes a bit easier to defend in some ways. And I think we as a team become easier to defend. We couldn't build anything out of the back because, like I said, you just eliminate one wing automatically. And then I feel like Trent is forcing things to justify why the heck he's in the middle and, kind of like throwing passes when he shouldn't. But going back to what you guys were talking about, the pressing, I really felt like today was played the way we did based on the personnel we had. Because, you can see, like, in terms of our pressing, Nunez is like presses, but without ideally thinking. That's why I thought like we made him the trigger. He has to just go full speed at somebody. It almost like they talked about this too much, that this is what Brighton wants you to do. Come to you at full speed so they can build. I don't think when he thinks of like, he basically thought himself out of the press at times. You could see more pressing and motioning, expecting, for example, Nunez to go into the goalie. And Nunez was still like, loading, like the press loading kind of thing. It was like 80%. And by the time you go, that's not how press works. That 20% is late enough. And then Diaz on the left-hand side can be really irresponsible in his pressing at times. I mean, towards the end of the half, in the second half, we gave up something from that wing purely because Diaz was somehow on the right wing pressing Mo's guy, totally abandoning his guy on that side. So I think in terms of squad, you had some irresponsible pressers that you do not want to roll the dice with. So we said, you know what, why don't we sit back, let them come to us because we want to go. I think you have Jota or Gakpo or somebody today up there. We might have been a bit more aggressive in pressing.
In terms of the press, Brighton may want to play out from the back, but compactness is one of the principles of defense. So we were not very compact in that first half. It seemed to get better, as I said, in the second half. And I think Gravenberch helped that a lot because he was getting involved with the front three to press Brighton's players as they play out of the back. I said in the Discord channel that in the first half, Klopp was being outcoached because he wasn't making any adjustments that were needed to cope with what Brighton were doing. But Brighton are, like, we know what they're going to do. Did we prepare badly, Harry, or were the players' minds on other things, or was it maybe a sense of like a hangover almost from last week, from the last minute goal and the card and the goal not given, that they're kind of, that there's a sense of trepidation in the Liverpool team that things aren't going to go their way?
I don't know. I think we set up well against them in terms of how they've managed to beat us in the past. So, for example, we when we used to have just one kind of pivot player in Fabinho, like one number 6, Brighton would put 2 players, one either side of him, and it gave him too much to do in terms of when they're trying to build out. If they look to go one way and he steps one way, they'll just go the other way. And by having Trent inside along with McAllister, it just makes it kind of impossible for them to do that, because now you have a 2v2 instead of a 2v1. And so I think that we had set up in a way to at least kind of nullify the way that they had been beating us previously. So we gave them a new problem to solve. And I think as the first half wore on, Brighton solved that problem and we had to respond. And I think we responded at half time. But if it wasn't for how well we pressed their build up, and which was brave of us to do that because that's what they want us to do, but we did yield 2 goals from it. But we could very easily have gone into half time 2-0 down and then playing catch up for the whole of the second half. As it was, we put ourselves in a really good position, going 2-1 up at half time and then making the change, Gravenberch on for Elliott, which did make us more compact, which did help us to kind of limit the amount of chances Brighton were having. So that's why I left with a sense of disappointment of we got ourselves in a really good position at half time. And then we had a spell in the second half where we could have scored a third goal. At a 3-1, solving the problems that we'd solved, we would have been in a really good position to take all 3 points. As it was, the way football games ebb and flow, there's more substitutions, they got a foothold in the game, and they got their equaliser, and it was left with this feeling of like, woof, Like, it's not that it's unfair that we've dropped 2 points, but we could have won that game.
Timuchin, I mentioned it in the Discord, which everybody should sign up for. Links below on whatever you're watching us on. It felt a lot like, at times, Brendan ball. It was too much side to side, too much keeping the ball, too much passing it back, and not enough penetrating the Brighton defensive lines to get them turned towards their own goal. Is this something that maybe we would have been helped with had Gakpo been available, or Jota for his penetrating runs in behind defenders? And if so, can we start looking at Núñez as the number 9 as being somebody who should be doing a lot more to offer options for the midfielders and the defenders to play into?
I don't think Núñez gives you that. It's just like a different skill set. I think Gakpo gives you that, right? I mean, Gakpo gives you more Bobby-like forward play, where he can drop back to midfield. He can be part of the interplay. He can create space for, so that Diaz and Mo can run behind it and stuff. Gakpo gives you that. Whereas Núñez, he's the one who wants to run into that space. So in some ways, like games like this, I would not really mind seeing him on the left. And, Gakpo in the middle or something like that, so that Núñez can exploit the space that Gakpo gives you. Obviously, Gakpo could not play today, but in general, I think, yes, if you have a player like Gakpo against a team like this, where you want to, it kind of like takes away totally us carving them through the middle, I think, with Núñez in there. Because his control, his interplay is not as good. I mean, today, I feel like when he's on the counter, his decision-making and his passing, that's when you get the best out of him in terms of like passing. Because when he catches a defense 3-on-3 and stuff like that, he plays the right pass and he usually plays it well. But if his back is to the goal and he has to kind of turn around, do interplay, give and go and stuff like that, I just don't think that's part of his like strength. So I think it should be more about using Gakpo in games like this and Núñez in games. This is why, this is that kind of discussion we have every freaking Friday, it feels like, with Anand and stuff. That's why I'd rather have Núñez come off the bench. I think the biggest thing that hurt us, like Harry was talking about, like the substitutions and stuff like that. We've been talking about the strength of this team being the depth, being able to bring a player like Gravenberch and stuff like that off the bench. With the suspensions and injuries and stuff like that, especially the 2 suspensions, we just could not do that up top. So I think we were kind of locked in with what we had. There was nowhere to go because you're not going to put Van Dijk in a game like this. So, I mean, you looked at that bench, there were really no options for attacking. Whereas normally you look at the bench, you might have Núñez there, or you might have Jota there, or somebody like that. And that changes the game a lot. Doesn't matter who the player is, because it makes the defense think and defend differently. And the thinking part alone can buy you time and situations where you get a goal in. So
I think that's a really good point, especially because I think we identified this playing through the middle as this is going to be a way that we can hurt Brighton. And we actually gave away that first goal, I think, from Van Dijk going, well, we're playing through the middle. So we didn't look up and see that McAllister had 3 Brighton players around him. And Diaz was 1v1 over the top for the big long ball. And I think it was smart of Klopp to go, let's try and play that way, even if we necessarily don't have the personnel, because it forces like Núñez, for example, to try and lift his game, to try and do that, which in the long term, if you can imagine Darwin doing all the crazy horse stuff that he can do and being so good on the counter and being able to drop in and link play, that's a really complete centre forward. And I think actually our best moment in the game, and maybe the most important moment of the game, was when Gravenberch hit the bar, and that comes from Szoboszlai gets released over the top. He plays it inside to Núñez, who drops, and he plays a really smart ball back to Szoboszlai. And I thought, oof, if Darwin could do more stuff like that more often, and if that's where he's going.
See, I think he can do that, though, when they don't have a lot of guys back. Because they were only at like 3-4 back at the time. It wasn't a counter, but it was like a semi-counter, if you will. But when we're building play and the other team has their shape, I think Núñez is not able to get in that interplay and do those things.
Right.
Yet. Hopefully, we just say yet.
Although, to be fair, if the other team doesn't have a lot of players back, even I could probably get into those positions. I'm not saying
that might be stretching a little
You need
bit.
50 yards space between 2 defenders for me to squeeze through. But here's my question, though, just on what Harry was saying. in terms of causing Brighton other problems, would it have been worth taking Nunez off and putting Doak on to give them something else to think about for the last 10 minutes of the game?
It depends on where you'd put him, because I think we've mostly seen Doak on the right wing, and I don't know that we want to bring Salah off in that game when we're looking for a goal and he's on a hat trick. Because then all the way through the international
we take Nunez, but we take Nunez off, put Salah in the middle and Doak on the right. That would give would have given Brighton's defense a lot more problems to deal with going into the last 10 minutes. But we made 2 defensive subs and 1 midfield sub. It almost seemed like Klopp was happy with the draw in the end.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the ambition always is to win, and I think that the team on the pitch thought they could do the job as long as they didn't concede another goal, and that's where those defensive substitutions came in. And we only ever talk about Trent's defending when he has a bad game. I thought he was outstanding against Matoma at times today. There were a couple of situations where there's one intervention from Trent, and if he doesn't make that intervention, it's a goal. It is a goal. And people would be like, well, that's his job, right? But like, there would have been no shame in conceding that goal, but there was excellent 1v1 defending from Trent. I'm thinking there was one point where there was a ball clipped over the top, and I think it was Welbeck was in behind, and he kind of stretched, like his foot was about 7 feet in the air, and he stretched and just caught it. And I thought, that's like highlight reel defending. And people probably are not going to talk about it because Trent's defending only matters when it's bad, right? And he came off for Gomez to be more defensively solid on that right-hand side. I think Gomez had a really difficult 20 minutes against Matoma. And so it was. I can see the logic behind why we did it, and I think that we'd have to look at it and say it didn't work.
Do you think it was for defense? I kind of like assumed based on how we were doing, I thought it was more like Trent did I have 90 minutes yet kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean that's the possibility as well. And this is the thing: is there's you have to balance. We're playing against a team that is like one of the best in the world at what they do. You're coping with injuries. You've also just played a game on Thursday, but you don't want to drop points. But you know the game's precariously balanced, and you're managing people's minute. Like there's so many things to manage. It's not just as simple as like in a video game. One of my players is tired. I'm going to bring on a player with new energy or whatever. Like there's so many different things to navigate. And I think that I think Klopp did a really good job. I think he's actually really kind of reaffirming his credentials as a great coach this season. The way that he managed the Newcastle game, for example, I think was one of the best coaching performances I've seen from a Liverpool manager.
But he had 2 other subs to make. Like it wasn't like he had an either or there. He had 2 more positions he could have changed out if he wanted to, and he isn't known for changing games. Let's be fair. He's known for making changes rather than De Zerbi, who seems to be very good at making game system change and substitutions. He had 2 more to make. Could he have made at least one in the attacking sense to get that winner instead of making 2 defensive and 1 midfield substitution and leaving Diaz, Nunez and Salah up front for the 90 minutes, especially when Nunez wasn't really that effective in the attack?
Yeah, I'd have to say that it must be something to do with how he sees Ben Doak, how he saw his readiness for this game, because it's the only option, especially when you take off Elliott, because he's someone who can play in the right wing or can play as a number 10. So you think if he starts the game on the bench, he's a potential extra attacking sub. But if you started him and then you've identified that you have to take him off, that's one less player you can bring on as a game changer in the forward line. So I think it all rested on Ben Doak, where he would fit in this game. And Klopp has made the decision that we're better off sticking with what we've got than bringing him on. I think the only other thing that he might have considered is to leave Trent on if he did have 90 minutes in him and push him into a more attacking role or to change system. But then I think you're getting into asking players to do things that they might not have trained for, etc. And now I'm getting into extreme speculation. Well, maybe this, maybe that. I don't know. He's made the judgment call that it was better not to make one of these attacking subs. It was better to make sure we don't concede and trust the players on the pitch could find a goal, which, they had some chances in the last couple of minutes. I think as soon as the injury time board went up, it was Brighton defending and Liverpool attacking for the last 4 minutes. So we were in the game. We could have got something from it. I think the intention was to get something from it, even with those defensive substitutions. And it probably just came down to a lack of depth in terms of who you bring off the bench. Because I think, like you said earlier, if he had Jota on as a sub with his ability to penetrate in behind and to carry the ball past defenders, I think that we definitely would have seen him.
Yeah, I think it goes to more
Is
of a
it
lack
possible?
of options.
Is it possible that Klopp sees Ben Doak as a 12-year-old because that's what he looks like?
I think we cannot rule that out at this time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you think about it, the Gravenberch substitution in some ways is the second most attacking substitution you can make. Because if you wanted to play it safer, you could have probably, and we even like speculated at halftime, like bringing Endo in and, like putting him as CDM, just do Endo, Mac, and Szoboszlai as your midfield. And in my head, that would be more of a defensive substitution. I don't think he felt Ben Doak was ready for a game like this, or would benefit, or we would benefit, or he would benefit. Either way, neither side would benefit from this. But if you look at that bench, I think the second you're like, if you're like, we got to make an attacking substitution, you're like, what do we put in? F forward. Well, we can't. That's the only guy. So the second most attacking player on that bench was probably Gravenberch that you could put into the game. And to be fair, we did that. If anything, I think he played really well. Obviously, if he finishes that, the game changes. But he played, I thought, extremely well. But I think, if you question anything in that game, why don't we play it safer? I think Endo would probably be like the safer substitution and put Mac into more of his normal position. Because we saw in the second half, as Mac gets into his more regular areas, when they played with Trent and he could receive the ball facing the goal in the middle of the opposition midfield, that's where he's really, really dangerous. And we just got to get more of that. That's the only positive I took from that second half, was the relationship between Trent and Mac looked 10 times better when we were building up. Let's hope we can kind of like build on that. Because I'm still not sold on this Trent experiment. I really would rather have him.
Let me throw a hand grenade into the conversation. What makes Ben Doak not ready for playing against Brighton and Hove Albion?
Physically, tactically, building into the press.
It sounds to me like a trope that people like to say in terms of young players. He's a professional player. He's played games. He's skillful, and it's be like 20 minutes, 15 minutes at the end of a game. What makes Brighton and Hove Albion such a scary prospect that somebody like Ben Doak is not ready to play against them? Because if he's not ready to play against Brighton, who is he ready to play against? Saying that so we can give Brian Shelton stick on Thursday night.
Luton Town, Sheffield United. I think there's like multiple reasons, and I don't credit though, like the 10-15 doesn't matter. It takes 2 minutes to make a difference in a game. If you're out of position for 2 minutes, that's all it takes. So it doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes. It's not like, oh, you can't fuck up too much in 15 minutes kind of thing. It's probably, Brian Shelton says size. It could be. But that's his thing, right? He's the little fast dude. He's not like if we wait another 3 years, he's going to be 6 feet. I think that train has left. So it's, that's the skill set. But if he goes rogue, like Diaz did, for example, in that one instance, right? You put him in for 10, 15 minutes there. If he does that error that Diaz made 3 times, that's giving 3 goal opportunities to Brighton. And I think that's what he is not ready for, especially on the wing. I think if you make a mistake in the middle in terms of positioning, like, sometimes Nunez will, like when you're pressing, it's not as deadly as the wing guy making that mistake because you're suddenly getting outnumbered on the wing.
I just want to point out that I'm pretty sure that if we put a cash bet on it, everybody in Liverpool Football Club would say that Luis Diaz goes rogue, going from the training ground to the bus and from the bus to the dressing room. That guy just looks like he doesn't know how to follow it. Let me ask this then. Let me put a cover over the hand grenade and say this. Arsenal are playing City. If it hasn't kicked off already. We talked before about the game. 9 minutes in. About, we would like Arsenal to win that. Gally was saying that any time that City get points taken off, it was going to be good for Liverpool. Would we still want that now after the draw, or would we prefer a draw between them two so nobody gets an advantage out of that game? Harry?
I think it's a little bit early in the season to go, this is going to be definitively better for us, right? Because it might be better, for example, for City to drop points because we're more likely to beat Arsenal than City by the time we meet them. It's one of many hypotheticals. Maybe a draw would be good for us in terms of, both teams drop points. That would be cool. But I think one of the key strengths of this season is that we're not burdened by the weight of expectation. We finished 5th last season. We're playing in the Europa League. There's an element of Liverpool are in transition. It's a project. We're still building, blah, blah, blah. So it's okay for us to finish 4th. It's okay for us to lose certain teams against certain teams that we're not supposed to lose against. And that actually, I think, has allowed us to win games and to actually put ourselves in the title conversation because we don't have that pressure. And so I think being reactive to situations rather than going, we need this result so that blah, 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 is that thing of we need Arsenal to win or we need this game to be a draw, to me speaks to we are definitely challenging for the title. And if we fall short, it's catastrophe. Whereas at the moment, I'm quite happy to go, let's see how the table shakes out and we'll take it one game at a time and we'll try and win our games and we'll see where we are in May kind of thing.
I want to be Harry.
I
would love to have that outlet. I really would. I can't force myself to have that.
To quote The Sopranos, and before we wrap it all up, sure, we break some balls here, but in the heel of the reel, as we say in Ireland, it's probably big picture and a few days removed. It's probably not a bad draw in the end, is it, Smoochen?
It reminds me, I think John was saying, it reminds me of the Chelsea draw. On paper, when you look, I don't know, if you look at the end of the year and, you didn't have any context, you look at the scores, you're like, 1 point at Stamford, that's not a catastrophe. 1 point away at Brighton, that's not a catastrophe. Like, it's not, whereas if you saw, I don't know, maybe like Bournemouth or something like that, you were like, you got to get those 3 points or something. No offense to Bournemouth, but so I think in that sense, no, but similar to the Chelsea game, because we saw Chelsea afterwards, similar to that, it feels like it's not a catastrophe. It's not a huge loss, but man, it should have been a win. And I think that's why it's more painful than, having a draw. Like normally it would be like, it's a tough away game. It's a great playing team. Brighton is a fun team to watch, man. I mean, like I said, it's a team that I go out of my way to watch. I might not do goal rush, and I might actually watch Brighton's game if like Liverpool is not playing, kind of a thing, to see like, good soccer in a way. So there's no shame in losing points away at Brighton. It just feels like we had it and we lost it.
Harry, what do you think?
We've beat them once in the last 8 now. They're a really good team and we find it really hard to play against them. So I think picking up a point when we picked up 1 point in 3 meetings last season is a positive, but it would have been really nice for, the fans traveling home from the South Coast to come back with 3 points. So not a terrible result. There was times in the first half where it looked like we'd be very lucky to get a point. So I'm happy with it. We'll see how valuable it comes. It proves to be at the end of the season.
Well, I think before we wrap up for the afternoon, so we can all enjoy our Sundays and watch Arsenal versus Man City, we have lots of things going on at American Scouser TV. We have our morning show tomorrow, next week, Wednesday and Friday, with our sponsors, I believe.
Yes, Reckless Coffee. So grab your Reckless Cup of Joe and join the morning show.
We'll have the Monday night podcast, the Thursday podcast, the EPL show. But what I think we should do is start a GoFundMe on American Scouser TV to see if we can raise enough money to get some testosterone shots that are untraceable to send to Ben Doak so he can grow his first facial hair before the next game. We have 2 weeks to do it in. It might work. And maybe you'll be ready to play.
I expect him to show up in like one of those like Abraham Lincoln.
Then we can call it with a change in the size of his shorts. We have that as well. As things start to drop. But it just remains to say to everybody, make sure you smash or gently press the like and subscribe buttons on the YouTube and the Facebooks and everything. Make sure you're following us and joining our Discord. The links are below. If you're watching us on YouTube and Facebook, and join the American Scouser TV crew. We are like a fantastic family, and we will guide you through the highs and the lows of following Liverpool. And Lord knows there's a lot of them either way. So thank you to Muchin, thank you, Harry. Make sure those dogs are well fed, and hopefully we'll have incredibly fat dogs by the time game 38 rolls around. And we will see everybody next week. Peace out and have a good one.